Today on the We Just Broke Off Another Hundo Says podcast, I'm going to be sharing a complete breakdown of what I earned from podcasting for an entire year and other celebratory stuff as well. So if that seems interesting, go ahead and stick around. Just over 1 year ago, I made the decision to move this podcast from being ad-supported on YouTube to being value for value. And what that means is I took off all ads on new episodes. I didn't put anything behind a paywall. And the only revenue that I earn is from direct contributions from the people who listen to this show. So let's briefly look at the top-level analytics for the last year. And over the last 365 days, I received 112,000 views for this podcast, which is 25% less than the prior year. I gained 419 subscribers, which was 35% less than the prior year, so it's not looking good. And then the actual income following YouTube fees was $1,496.70, which was 11% more than the prior year. So although views and subscribers decreased by more than 25%, revenue actually increased by 11%. So we're off to a good start. But now we're doing one of my favorite things, jumping into Excel. Yahoo! Screen recording, go! All right, so we have the 112,000 views, the 419 subscribers, and the approximately $1,500 in revenue. I do want to break that down a little bit. 90% of that revenue was from contributions and super thanks. The other 10% did stem from ads on prior year's episodes because I didn't remove ads on all the existing videos, only from new episodes starting about 1 year ago. And I wanted to calculate the EPM, or the earnings per 1,000 views. That came to $13.33 per 1,000 views. That is really good. Most CPMs are about $6 on the high end, $2 on the low end. So a $13 CPM, or earnings per 1,000 views, is fantastic. And if that was the end of the story where I actually took home $1,500 and I earned $13 for every 1,000 views, this would be a much happier story. But there are costs associated with running this channel, with running the podcast, with running the websites. So we need to account for that. And this is where it gets sad. First up, we have podcast hosting, because this is actually a podcast. It does have a podcast host. It has audio distributed via RSS. That comes to $240 each year, or $20 per month. Then we have the hosting for the website, which is geeksrising.com. Hosting for that is $228 per year. Starting to add up, isn't it? We're already almost at $500. Then we have SpeakPipe, which was a voicemail service that I was using. That came to $180 a year, which was $15 a month. That doesn't sound like a lot, $15 a month, but over a year, that's $180. That really adds up. Then we have 3 domains. We have geeksrising.com. That's the podcast network. That's $20 a year. We have bandrewsays.com, which is $13 a year, $12.86. And we have askbandrew.com, which is another $13 or $12.86 a year. Then we have email. I used to have a lot more emails for Geeks Rising, but it got expensive. I bought an email server. That service was discontinued. All that money down the drain. So I had to go back to paying for email monthly, and it is $7.75 a month for Bandrew at geeksrising.com. That comes to $93 every single year. As far as the graphic cost for this show, I could include Photoshop, but I also use that for the Podcastage channel, so I am omitting that. The only thing I am including here is Midjourney, which is AI photo generation. That comes to about $11 a month, which is $129 every single year. That means the total cost to run this channel is $916 every single year. That must mean my take-home pay is $581, right? Wrong. That is EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. We don't have debt, so there's no interest. We don't have depreciation or amortization, so all we have to account for is taxes. We are saying taxes are 35%. 35% tax on that 581 comes to $203, so the net income is $377.56 for an entire year of work. What does that break down to into an episode level? How much did I earn for each episode that I put out? I put out about 40 episodes, so it comes out to $9.44 an episode. And if we break it down to an hourly pay, about 5 hours per episode, which is conservative. It typically takes more like 8. But if we assume 5 hours an episode, that is $1.89 an hour for my labor on this podcast. Now, I have tried to save a bit of money. You will have noticed maybe 4 months ago, the site for Bandrew Says moved from bandrewsays.com to geeksrising.com. That's because I canceled Podpage, which was about $85 a year. It was nicer looking, but I didn't need to be paying for that. I already have Geeks Rising. I pay for that hosting. And if people are on geeksrising.com, perhaps they'll check out the other shows on the network. And I also just recently canceled SpeakPipe, which was $180 a year. So that expense is going to disappear. And the way that I have offset that, now if you go to askbandrew.com, again, it directs to Geeks Rising, and I have a submission form on that website. And there's a way to attach an audio file there. So I could have been saving that money this entire time. I just had no idea that was an option on Squarespace, which is where I host the website. So that is the answer. 1 year of work on this show, value for value. The revenue was about $1,500. Once we account for all the expenses of running this show and the podcast network, $377.56. Is that worth it? For some people, no. For me, absolutely. This is a fun side gig, fun hobby that I do. I just have fun doing that. And I am thrilled that people get value out of this show. That is why I have this revenue, because it is a value for value show. And the only income that I earn is if somebody gets value from this show and they decide to return that value to me monetarily. So that is 1 year of this experiment going V for V. I have loved it. I have enjoyed not forcing people to watch horrible, horrible ads. And there you go. That's a breakdown. I don't know how other V for V podcasts fare. I don't know the revenue of other podcasters who are ad-supported or Patreon-supported. I would love to hear from you if you do run a show V for V, ad-supported, or do memberships or Patreon or anything like that. It seems to me like this is a good amount of income for a show of my size. It pays the bills. I get a little bit of additional revenue or income, and I can invest that back into the show if I need to. So I am a happy camper. This is great. It has been an incredible experience, an incredible experiment. And that is going to conclude the Excel spreadsheet sharing. So let me go ahead and stop recording the screen so the file does not become 12 gigabytes. Okay, That is all the earnings talk. What else do we have? And I just said 400 episodes in, and I still have crutch words. I still say I got a notification on the dashboard for this YouTube channel, for this podcast. We just hit 1 million views. I know that doesn't seem like a lot because there are podcasts out there that have been around for a while. They have 50, 100 million views. There are YouTube channels. I run a YouTube channel that has about 74, 75 million views. So 1 million is not some crazy high number. But for a podcast that's just a dope in his spare bedroom talking about YouTube and content creation, that is incredible to me. The fact that we hit 1 million views on the video version of this show is baffling. So thank you very much for watching and listening for 9 years, coming on 10 years. That is just, it's incredible. So thank you very much. And the other thing, we just broke off another hundo, to quote Hot Saucerman of the Comedy Bing Bong podcast, breaking off another hundo. I wanted to look and see how long it has taken me to record and release another 100 episodes because I have been a lot more sporadic with my releases. Episode 300 was on April 10th, 2022, so it took me over 2 years to get another 100 episodes. In that time, I don't know if much has changed on this show. I have lost a lot of weight in that time. I am much healthier. I am much happier. I am going outside more. I am not locked indoors all the time. So I would say episode 400, looking a lot better, feeling a lot better, rocking and rolling a lot better than 2022. Geez, that was the peak of just the darkness. I don't ever want to go back there. 2020 to 2022 sucked, dude. Those years sucked. The content was good. I enjoyed making the content, but those years outside of making videos and podcasts, yikes. All right, I don't have any other notes on celebratory stuff to discuss. There is a bit of news, but we'll be discussing that next week. The FTC came out with some new regulations, which I find very interesting. I don't necessarily think it's going to impact content creators too much, or at least ethical content creators too much, but it is going to be a great thing for the end consumer, and I think it'll be fun to dive into that and share that with you. But let's talk about what I have been testing. I am on the same microphone as last week, the Shure Nexadyne 8C. New microphone from Shure, cardioid polar pattern. Some people like the sound of it. Other people hate the sound of it. Let me know what your thoughts are. I am running it into the Universal Audio X8. I did remember to check my sample rate. We are recording 48 kilohertz. I have made that mistake multiple times. How embarrassing. But let's jump to what you had to say. First comment comes from Crazy Wabbit. He says, "You hit the nail on the hammer with the statement about the financial gain of a CEO is not your goal. His response was the ultimate form of bias and a self-shilling prophecy I've seen. I was a podcaster back in 2015, and I vividly remember suggesting using YouTube as a podcast host when people were asking about budget-friendly options. As that is a reality for many of us who are boring hobbyists, the pushback was obnoxious and it typically came from old hat gatekeepers. Even going the RSS route is no guarantee that your content is safe if you are someone like a person whose name sounds like Malik's Phones. My hope is that as the older generation settles in Florida or assisted living dwellings, the young cats who do not care about meaningless classifications will continue to use this platform that allow anyone to participate regardless of their financial status. Fantastic episode. I might be a shill fan for full disclosure." Crazy Wabbit, thank you very much for the comment. I really appreciate it. I have no doubt that you got a lot of pushback and a lot of obnoxious comments if you suggested, hey, why don't you just podcast on YouTube? Especially back in 2015. Yeah, I do not doubt that. That seems par for the course. I want to push back on you a little bit, though. You say that RSS is no guarantee that your content is safe, and you quote or reference Malix Phones, aka Alex Jones, also known as the host of InfoWars. InfoWars was banned from a lot of podcatchers, a lot of podcast directories back in 2017, if I'm remembering correctly. So if you went into these podcatchers and you searched InfoWars, his shows would no longer appear. But his shows still existed. So you could still add the show to your podcatcher. You just needed to go find the RSS feed URL, and then you could manually add it. So his content was still safe. His content still existed. He was just removed from search results, from the directories. So I just wanted to clarify that because I understand the argument that you're protecting yourself from deplatforming, but you can still be removed from certain directories, from search results. You can be deprioritized. They can manipulate search results to their heart's content. And any of these podcatchers, they have done it in the past. They will do it in the future. I don't doubt that. But if you have an actual RSS feed URL, and you aren't on a service like Libsyn, Blueberry, anything like that. I don't know if any of these actual podcast hosting platforms have taken people down. But if you actually own your own hosting, own your own distribution, own your own RSS feed, you are safe from that. If you are hosting your podcast on somebody else's platform, you are always at risk of having that existence, that podcast, that RSS feed taken away from you. But Alex Jones remains online. His RSS feed is still available and you can still add it to your podcatcher. You just can't search for it in the podcatcher. You just need to find the URL for the RSS feed and then manually add it. I think that's important to point out because the argument does hold water that having your own RSS feed is protection from being deplatformed. Then we have a comment from Christopher Gronland. He says, as much as I love Blueberry, I use them for my narrated short fiction podcast and love their flow and plugins. Todd and many others seem to cling to RSS or it's not a podcast. And I get it. But like it or not, many people I know talk about watching or listening to podcasts on YouTube, and I know plenty of people who don't watch but play the audio and go. They subscribe to things, and sure, maybe it doesn't come through an RSS feed, but to many, they are podcasts they subscribe to in many people's eyes. Christopher, thank you very much for the comment. I really appreciate it. And to quote Crazy Wabbit, I think you hit the hammer right on the nail with this one. And it comes down to what the end consumer classifies as a podcast. Yes, technically speaking, a podcast may require an RSS feed. However, the end consumer conflates the term podcast with any form of less structured, long-form spoken word content that doesn't even need to be distributed via RSS. It's kind of like Kleenex. Kleenex is a brand name of facial tissues, of disposable snot rags, but the term Kleenex is now generic, essentially. People use Kleenex to describe a disposable snot rag, a facial tissue, to be less vulgar about it. And I think that's what we're seeing with podcasting. Podcasts are not a certain brand, but they had always been audio or video distributed via RSS. But the end consumer no longer subscribes, no pun intended, to that definition, to that requirement. It is just long-form spoken word content. So if you want to die on the hill of podcasts must have an RSS feed or you're not a podcaster, more power to you. I don't care. I'm going to go the route of being where the audience is because that's who I am making content for. That's my take on it. And Christopher, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and discussing how some people do seem to cling to RSS. And I understand it. That's their business. Of course they're going to cling to RSS. Of course they're going to. Why wouldn't they? Next, we have, man, I am just getting comments that they're trying to be the best comment I've ever received. This comes from Kenorki3642. They say, your podcast may not be economically viable. You might sound nasal and your voice is pitched far too high for my liking. Your music might sound a little infantile at times. Your gear reviews sometimes, well, they might be mediocre at best. And yet, I'm not going to stop listening to you as long as you have something interesting to say, hobbyist or pro, and I'm glad you have not commercialized the heck out of yourself. Kenorki3642, thank you, I think. That may be one of the most backhanded compliments I have ever received. I appreciate that. I suppose my voice sucks, my music sucks, my reviews are mediocre. Thanks. I love it. The commercialization aspect, though, I find that so interesting. I have been going on a bit of a journey over the last couple of weeks. I have done everything within my power to not overly commercialize any of my channels. I could have had host-read ads on Podcastage for the last 7 years, probably, and easily earn $500 to $2,000 per video. $500 on the conservative side, $2,000 on the much more liberal side. So it's very conceivable that I've left tens of thousands of dollars on the table. I also could add mid-roll ads to all of those videos and earn a lot more money. I chose not to do that, not because I hate money, but because I hate mid-roll ads. The journey that I've been going on is I do all of this because I want to be able to sleep better at night. But in the end, I don't think many people are going to have noticed that or even appreciated it. They will just say, hey, cool video, okay, I'm moving on. Because most people who really hate ads, they're going to have their ad blockers on. So they don't care. I don't think it really changes people's perception of you. Heck, I've even left money on the table because I refuse to accept any dollar from any company that I review. And if a company sends me any gear, I refuse to sell that because that's a bit too close to getting paid by the company. I do all these things to remain as ethically above board as I can and to sleep better at night knowing that I am not providing a terrible viewing experience. But I'm just dealing with this. I don't think anybody really cares. I don't think people care because a lot of the biggest channels out there, they just shove as many ads as they can down people's throats. Every single episode, every single podcast, here are 6 host-read ads. Or 3 host-read ads, one here, one here, one here. And people still watch, people still subscribe, and they make so much money. I'm not doing this because I hate money. I'm just second-guessing a lot of my choices because there's a lot of money left on the table. Oh well, who cares? It's just money. I don't know where that came from. Just an interesting thought I've been working through. Some people may find that vulgar to discuss and think about and share, but it's the reality of being a content creator. You get to make these decisions, and you will either regret them or not. I don't actually regret making the decision to be ethically above board and to not accept money from companies I review and to not do mid-roll ads and do host-read ads because I hate them. I heckin' hate them. So I can sleep well at night. I still have a job. I still earn good income. I still cover my costs with all this. I'm rocking and rolling. I don't actually regret it. I'm just thinking, it's a lot of money. That's a lot of money I left on the table. Am I going to change? No. That punk rock me of when I was 15, it's still in there a little bit. And old me, 20 years down the road, hates him. Thank you for the most backhanded comment I may have ever received. And thank you for spurring that interesting discussion that may be vulgar and people may say, look at him, pathetic. Next, we have a comment from Obscure Mics, the absolute mad lad and legend Bark from Obscure Mics. I'm never doing that again. He says, I'm never going to do that again. I always enjoy your takes, regardless of whether I agree or not. You always relay your outlook on controversial things in a respectful and insightful way. Imagine if we all thought the same way. What a boring world. And holy crap, the Nexadyne works really well on your voice, much better than mine, in my opinion. Bark, thank you very much for the comment, and thank you for the feedback about the microphone. I also think it sounds pretty good on my voice. Is it my favorite? No. But does it sound pretty good? Sure. I know, that's what I say with pretty much every single microphone. Is it my favorite? No. But is it functional? Sure it is. No pun intended, because it is a Shure microphone. But as far as sharing my outlook on controversial ideas, as I mentioned last week, I think one of the most important things we can do as individuals, not as content creators or anything, is try to understand different people's perspectives. That is something that I think is severely lacking. People won't try to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and understand why they may think the way that they do. They will not listen to somebody who has disagreements with them, because why challenge your own worldviews? That's difficult. Maybe somebody will change your opinion. And this is something that I actually discussed last night with a few people in my podcastage voice chat. I think one of the biggest issues is nobody wants to admit, I am wrong. I made a mistake. I was being stupid. Nobody likes admitting that, even in private, because that means you made a mistake. You don't want to be dumb. You want to be smart. But what has changed to make that even more difficult? Everybody seems to share every controversial opinion about every controversial topic that they can find online. So not only do they have to overcome that internal struggle of admitting, hey, I was wrong, but they would also have to publicly share that admission. Hey, I was being stupid and I was wrong. And nobody wants to do that, because that's getting very close to being publicly shamed. So I think publicly sharing every single opinion that you have about every topic is a recipe for disaster, is a recipe for people getting stuck in their ways, because a lot of people don't have the ability currently, it seems, to admit, hey, I was wrong. Whoops. Sorry about that. I was kind of a dick about that topic. Nobody wants to admit that. Just something else interesting I felt like sharing, and thank you for allowing me to get on my soapbox and preach to all of you. Let's go to the next comment. Bark, I love you. If you want obscure microphone reviews, go check out Obscure Mics. Fantastic stuff. He'll find the weirdest microphones out there that have been discontinued for 30 years and make great videos on them. And he has some of the most vulgar sexual jokes of... No, I will go on a branch and say the most vulgar jokes on any microphone review channel. Good on ya. Good stuff. All right. Next, we have a comment from Dark Corner Studios. He says, that favorite comment was brilliantly beautiful. It had everything. Maybe mix some religion into your reviews, I guess. I like to mix in the odd JFC in my videos just to keep it religious. Aiden, thank you very much for the comment, and more importantly, thank you very much for the suggestion. I think I will start to include religion, politics, war into my microphone reviews. I'll discuss Israel and Palestine. I think that'll go over really well. I'll discuss Islam and Christianity. I think this is just a recipe for a brilliant channel. And as far as my stance on all of this, I'm going to reference a comment that I just got that made me laugh out loud. Not on the podcast, but on Podcastage. I got this incredible comment, and I love sharing some of this stuff with you. This is the comment that I got. The comment is from Johnny Ketchacop, and he says, "Thank you, Jew." I don't know what to make of that comment. I have no idea what to make of that, but it made me laugh out loud. You're welcome, I guess. So I think including religion, politics, anything and everything in between it's going to be good for podcast. It's just going to bring the viewership up. It's going to grow the channel. Thank you very much, Aiden. Appreciate you. Next, we have a comment from Just Heathers, who runs Sunshine and Power Cuts, a podcast on geeksrising.com. Go check it out, geeksrising.com. She says, "Happy 7th podcastage Discord anniversary today. You would think after almost a decade of running the channel that I would be able to say podcastage correctly, but nope, it is still difficult for me. The anniversary, I believe, was on the 1st of September. That means the Discord is 7 years old. There has been a community of microphone nerds that has remained mostly civil for the better part of a decade. That is incredible. And it's one of my favorite places on the internet. I love hanging out there. Every single week we do a voice chat and we just goof and gaff and have a laugh about anything and everything in between. And occasionally we'll talk about audio gear, but most of the time it's just nonsense. I love that place. So thank you to everybody who is a part of the Discord server. If you want to check it out, podcastage.com/Discord. And thank you, Heather, for being one of the great moderators. Thank you to every single one of the fantastic moderators who does such a great job keeping things civil, keeping things under control, keeping things from getting out of hand. But for the most part, us mic nerds, we're pretty chill. Just don't be a dick and you'll fit right in. Next, we have a comment from Bad Middens, and he says, "After listening to JTW's comment, I have to stop listening to anything you say until you have roadies and a semi-truck. I have my principles." Bad Middens, I understand completely why you have that stance. I am just a lowly hobbyist. I don't have roadies. I don't have a semi-truck. Next, we have a comment from Sound Speeds, and he says, "If you ever go on tour, I'll drive your semi and be a roadie." Alan, thank you very much for the offer, and Bad Middens, welcome back. Now you must listen to every single thing I say because I am no longer a hobbyist. JTW, get back on this podcast train because I am no longer a hobbyist. I am a professional because I now have a hired roadie and a semi-truck. Suck it, JTW. I am a professional. I have officially made it. Do we make any money? No. Do we lose money as a band? Absolutely. But we have made it because we met your criteria for being successful. A semi-truck and a roadie. Thank you, Alan, for allowing me to win that argument. An argument that I was having with nobody because JTW is never going to watch another one of my episodes. They just watched that one and then went on about their life. But for us, I won. We know I won. JTW lost. And isn't that sweet? That is it for the comments. We are now jumping to the value for value section of this show because this is a V for V podcast. What that means, this show does not go behind a paywall. I do not have ads on it. I put it out there. I try to make it as entertaining, as informative as I can. And if you get any value out of the show, I just ask you return that, whether it be time, talent, or treasure. I did steal this format from the No Agenda guys, Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak. So thank you to them for pioneering it and setting up this idea for us lowly podcasters. Much obliged. Appreciate you. First, we have 5 Great British Pounds. I didn't know what that was. 5 GBP from Action Popcast. He says, I just started listening to this episode, and I have to say, I love your podcast. I've been catching up for a couple of months now after discovering you through your excellent mic reviews, which were instrumental in helping me improve my setup. I run a very small channel from an actual cupboard in my house with a bit of cheap soundproofing on the walls. My gear includes a Vocaster 1 and an SM58. I'm still pretty new to all of this, and while I'm constantly learning how to make things sound better, I think I've managed to achieve acceptable quality, especially considering that less than 2 years ago, I had no clue what I was doing. I wanted to share my experience related to this discussion about whether a podcast needs to have an RSS feed. Early on, I was told that if my content was only on YouTube, it wasn't considered a podcast, but rather a vlog or live stream. Taking this advice to heart, I began uploading my episodes to Spotify using an RSS feed to distribute the audio version. Interestingly, even though I offer the podcast on Spotify, most of my listeners still prefer to catch the episodes on YouTube, whether live or pre-recorded. As a result, my actual listens on Spotify are laughably low. Maybe I'm not great at this, but I genuinely enjoy it, and I have a few loyal listeners/viewers who keep me motivated. As long as that's the case, I'll continue improving my content and audio skills, upgrading my equipment as I can, even though I know I'll likely never make a penny from this or hit 1,000 subs on YouTube. I'm a hobbyist and proud of it. However, given the effort it takes to edit my own shows for audio and the low listenership on those platforms, I'm seriously considering dropping the audio-only version. If that means I'm not considered a podcaster by some people, so be it. I'm not going to let others' titles, definitions, or opinions ruin something I genuinely enjoy doing. Before the pandemic, I was in a band, and when that went away, I had a massive void to fill. Podcasting, vlogging, or whatever people want to call it genuinely saved me from a dark depression. Bandrew, I love what you do. Sorry if this came off as ranty or nonsensical, and sorry for somewhat deviating from the video RSS feed discussion. My point is, who cares what others say? I love your content no matter the format or whatever name the professionals give it. Action Popcast, thank you very much for the £5, and also thank you very much for the insightful comment. I think the discrepancy we have here between us hobbyists and all of these professionals is they don't understand, or maybe they just ignore the fact that people do it for fun. This is something we do for fun. We enjoy it. Our livelihood is not dependent on the income from these hobbies, from these podcasts. We do it because we enjoy discussing topics, sharing thoughts on ideas, discussing religion and politics and all the things that matter, unlike microphones and audio gear and reviews, which are frivolous and stupid to discuss. I don't think they understand that, or maybe they simply don't want to think about that because that might lead to them sharing thoughts and opinions that may negatively impact their bottom line, because a lot of these professionals, they aren't just making money off of their shows, off of ads on their shows, they're making money off of selling courses. Here's how you make a bunch of money off your podcast. Here's how you make your podcast super successful. Or here is how you get a good RSS feed on my podcast hosting service. So there's a bit of conflict of interest if you're talking about just general advice. Maybe not conflict of interest. And the CEO, I would say conflict of interest as far as the CEO goes, but as far as people selling courses, maybe not a conflict of interest, but you understand why they may be recommending certain things. And there may be great information there. There may be fantastic information in those courses. I'm not downplaying that. I'm just pointing out that I think a lot of the professionals, they either don't understand that people do it for fun, or maybe they just ignore that people do it for fun because they want to push the idea you can get rich doing this, or you need to have an RSS feed, because when people go down those paths, these professionals, they earn more money. Thank you very much, Action Popcast. I really appreciate you. Next, we have $5 Canadian from Typical Books, who is Lydia, and she says, have not listened yet. Already know this will be a fab episode, but wanted to congratulate you on the eve of the 400th episode. $3.99 and doing fine, as the saying goes. Amazing. Thank you so much for years of hard work, box tossing and all. If even 1% of your advice and reviews sink in, our shows and gear is better for it. Thank you, Lydia. Lydia, thank you very much for the incredibly kind words and the cheer for episode 400. I truly can't believe that this is episode 400 of this show. I started this show back in 2015, and I never thought that I would be able to make it past episode 100, 200, 300, or hit 400. I imagined I would run out of stuff to talk about and lose steam after 50 episodes. Because I had a show prior to this, and it made it to episode 86, 87, something like that. And I ran out of stuff to talk about and wanted to start a new show. So I went over here. And I don't know how we're here. But thank you very much for the support. Thank you for listening. Thank you to every single one of you who listens to this show. It really does mean the world to me. And it's just a fun outlet for me. The fact that some of you do enjoy it, some of you get value out of it, just makes it that much more rewarding for me. So thank you very much. And lastly, we have €50 from TechMed. Raina Richter, he says, Danke. Raina, thank you so much for the €50, and thank you for the continued support. It really does mean the world to me, and I know I say the same thing every single week. I hope it doesn't come across insincere. It really does mean the world to me. It helps keep the bills paid, keep the show running. You saw how expensive this show is to run, which I never really truly understood until I itemized everything. I didn't realize it cost about $1,000 a year. Well, now we're down to about $800. After cutting out those unnecessary expenses, but thank you very much. And the support of these amazing people keeps this show ad-free. So if you enjoy this being ad-free on YouTube, if you enjoy it being ad-free in your podcatcher, it is thanks to these wonderful people, Raina, Lydia, and Action Popcast. So thank you to all of them this week, and thank you to you for coming by, listening. I don't think I have a weekly recommendation. Actually, I do have a weekly recommendation algorithm. For a couple of weeks, I have been a bit lazy. I have not been shutting off my air conditioning prior to recording. In my podcasting signal path, I have a gate. That gate attenuates the signal by about 10 decibels. So it's not the most noticeable thing. But when there's nothing underneath there, when there's not this underlying hiss, it's very transparent. But because I have been so lazy and the aircon has been coming on and off for a couple of weeks, it becomes extremely apparent when the gate is engaging and disengaging, because you have this kind of pumping of this, and it is incredibly annoying. So my weekly recommendation for the algorithm is to shut off your air conditioner before you record if you're using a gate. Because I refuse to use spectral denoise if I can avoid it. And that's what I have done this week. I have shut off the air conditioning, Actually, I don't think shutting off your AC saves money. If I remember correctly, it's actually worse for your bill because it gets a lot hotter, and then the AC has to work harder to cool it back down. So it costs more money, but it sounds better. And why am I wearing a hoodie when there's no air conditioning running? I don't know. We'll worry about that later. That is going to wrap up episode 400 of this podcast. Not very news heavy, but this is called the Bandrew Says podcast, so I says what I want, so when I wants to say it. And this is more of a not psychological, more of a, I don't know, my words are failing me right now, theoretical, philosophical episode where we discuss a lot of random topics. So I appreciate you coming by. I appreciate you listening for 400 episodes. Here's to hoping we can do 400 more. God willing, I'll still be around to do another 400 episodes. We'll hit 1,000 in 15 years, maybe. Wouldn't that be sweet? That's my goal. My next actual goal is to hit 1,000 episodes on this podcast. We'll see if it happens. Thank you for coming by. I appreciate you. I love you. I know you could be doing anything with your time, hanging with friends, listening to anything else. The fact that you choose to spend any amount of time listening to me really does mean the world to me, and I try not to squander your time. I hope you got value out of this. Have an amazing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Next Sunday, I will be back. I will be talking at you, with you, about you. We'll be discussing the FTC news, new ruling, new guidance. How exciting is that? If that's not a tease, I don't know what else is. Hey, want to discuss governmental regulation about online influencers? How sexy is that? I will talk to you later. Bye-bye. Whoa.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer is Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.